Hello and welcome back. I was going to start this episode with a short reading, but as I was recording it, I thought, no, it just doesn't feel right. I think what I'll do is I'll just tell you what I was going to write as a way of introducing this episode, which is all about how your higher self wants to connect. What I was going to write was this sort of story of how evolution happens right at the start of the animal kingdom, this evolution towards the higher self. It begins there. And this journey of wanting to connect happens like through all of these incarnations that we have as we evolve from animal to human. Now, as interesting as all of that is, it's a roundabout way of saying that, the journey of that higher self connection happens over millions of years and a whole cycle of evolution. And it doesn't stop. And it's the higher self that's driving this whole journey in the first place. That's how much it wants to connect. It's sending out that call over millions of years through the jungles, through your life as through our lives as monkeys or whatever evolutionary path we're on. It's calling for you. And unfortunately, but also fortunately, it doesn't stop calling until you pick up the phone. Bit of a cliche, but you get it. I'm trying to make it as simple as I can, because the actual dynamics of that connection are really quite complex. But we're going to get into this. I'm going to try and speak about this really important topic in a simple, relatable way without dumbing it down. Let me give it a go. I'm Anton Jarrett, and you're listening to the Higher Self Dialogues. Okay, so let's get into this. I think the first thing I wanted to draw attention to was that there's this natural pull and attraction between the higher self. It's kind of like built in. It's built into the system. It's right in there as a cosmic structure. And so it's impossible for the higher and lower self to remain separate through all eternity. It just doesn't happen. Can't happen. And there's a lot of spiritual teachings out there that talk about this dynamic. I don't want to focus on spiritual teachings. I just want to talk about it in a natural way. But of course, there's some need to talk about these ideas, or this idea of evolution and involution, because that's like the main dynamic that governs the connection between the higher and lower self. If you're trying to connect with your higher self, if this is something that's part of your spiritual journey, or if you're just experiencing the effects of struggle of not being connected to your higher self, even if you have no idea about higher self, then the reason why that struggle is happening is because of dynamics of evolution. And as I said, this switch from involution to evolution happens way back in the animal kingdom. Long, long ago. At some point in that jungle, as a beast of prey, the higher self of that creature starts to switch into an evolutionary phase. A journey of connection begins, and it's that journey of connection that drives evolution forward. Now, in many ways, we're like really far from the animal kingdom. We are not beasts of prey. Physically, our teeth, our nails, our fingers, we don't have claws, we don't have big tiger-like incisors. If we were up against a monkey, we'd lose that fight. We're really far from the animal kingdom. But in another way, as I'm sure you can probably relate to, especially with what's going on in the world, but also as it's been going on for centuries, we're still quite animalistic. We're still not totally out of the animal kingdom. Yeah, it's been a long journey. It's been a long journey, and your higher self knows how long it's been because it's aware of all the lives that it has lived to get to this point of now being able to talk about the higher self in a direct way, and not even in a religious way anymore. We've built all these systems of religion and philosophy to kind of try and understand this connection in this very, very particular way. But now we've even evolved to a point where we're able to talk about the higher self without necessarily attaching to all of those different systems. I mean, they are all still very valuable and important and meaningful. And they are also undergoing their own evolution, by the way. But for those who don't have any connection in particular to one or another tradition, then you can kind of talk about this higher self connection in a freer way. It's not necessary even to talk about it with reference to modern spirituality, because that connection is living. It's in the structure of your being, however you want to frame it. And the point here is that evolution has gone so far that not only are we evolved past the animal kingdom, past even early civilization and frameworks of thinking, but we're so close to connecting, to overcoming that separation with the higher self, that we're now able to actively work on connection. But because we're so close, the pain and consciousness of that separation is also more acute. And so is the feeling of being lost, of being disconnected, of being adrift. It's only when you feel the pull of something strongly that you can feel the distance. In many ways, it's a great blessing that the animal has no idea, has even, far less idea about that it has a higher self than we do. Because if it was aware that it had a higher self back in the animal kingdom, then it would be aware of all the pain and suffering that's to come for millions of years before it could connect. I mean, that would be torture. Thankfully, it's not like that. It's when you become aware of the higher self, you also become aware that, it's close. Yes, you feel the pain more acutely than the animal ever could, but at least it's not millions of years away. Might not be happening in this life, it might not be happening in the next life, but it's close. It's happening. The connection is happening. And the most important thing is you now have the tools to be able to facilitate it. So when the connection becomes live, as it were, you become aware that, I have a higher self, or there's this possibility that I have a higher self. At the same time, you realize that you've been equipped with the tools to facilitate that connection, that it's like perfectly structured. In the meantime, though, there's separation. There's this feeling of separation. Remember in the last episode, I talked about this picture of the lonely, wandering, blindfolded creature. So sad, just sensing, but struggling to connect with itself, with the ground of being. And this idea of the struggle. Why is it such a struggle? If I'm saying here, okay, the higher self wants to connect with its lower self, and the lower self wants to connect with its higher self, then why doesn't it just happen? Well, big question. But the big answer, the simple answer, I would say anyway, is that it's to do with order and nature. Just look to the natural world. Evolution is a natural phenomenon. So look around, look at the natural world. Everything is so perfectly ordered and reliable. I mean, even things that are random and chaos, or seem to be chaos and chaotic systems, they exist within an ordered hierarchical structure that allows chaos to exist. I mean, if total chaos just existed, then, well, we wouldn't be able to exist, really. We wouldn't be able to function because our bodies wouldn't be able to remain intact, and the sun wouldn't go around in a predictable way, and blood wouldn't flow in the same direction. And I mean, the planet would just go out of orbit all the time, and the electrons wouldn't go around their nuclei, and the whole cosmos would just be a mess. And, well, there wouldn't be such a thing as existence to even understand that the cosmos was a mess. So, in reality, there wouldn't be any existence. But the fact is, there is existence. I mean, I think we can all prove that by the fact that we are being, we are here, experiencing existence, which kind of proves that, yeah, there isn't chaos, that there is order. And because everything is ordered, because evolution and involution and natural processes, the spiritual reality is also natural and ordered and follows processes. The whole thing is ordered. And everything has to happen in a certain way. So the connection between the higher and lower self has to happen in a certain way. It has to be a certain sequence of events and processes, things happening in order, just like in the physical natural world. I mean, you can't have a tree that goes from seed to a fully grown oak without going through all the stages that the tree has to go through. And the same with us. We don't see us, missing any stages when we come out of the womb, or even when we're in the womb. You don't go from the first trimester to the third. We don't go from age 0 or 1 to age 15. You have to go through all the preceding ages. This is just the natural order of things. And it's the same with the higher self. So the higher self wants to connect. There's that wish, that desire that comes from the higher self to unite, to overcome separation. But this wish follows a natural order of manifesting. And in fact, in a deeper way, it's this wish that drives evolution in the first place. It's the dynamic, the drive, the desire to connect higher and lower that is like a fundamental driving force of involution and evolution, a fundamental drive of the whole cycle. This is like, whoa, huge. It's like the whole universe is driven by this dynamic of connection and dynamic of separation. Because in the early part of the cycle, there's this desire to separate from the higher self. After you've experienced enormous eons of connection, the higher self wants to experience separation. So it goes through a whole period of separation, and that's involution. So this is all spiritual philosophy. What I want to talk about, of course, is the fact that the higher self wants you. This is about an individual's life here on planet Earth, and how lonely and difficult and challenging it is. And it's because we're experiencing separation from ourselves, from the ground of being, from our highest being. Because it's through our higher selves that we experience connection to everything else. Because the higher self is ultimately at one with everything. And that journey begins in the animal kingdom, and it ends at the end of the animal kingdom, and we're at the end of that animal kingdom. It wants to integrate, wants its lower self to understand it and know it and experience its higher self. Just can't magically make it happen. Has to follow a process. It's a natural process. It's a journey of many lives. Now, the higher self has a massive advantage. It knows that this journey and process is necessary. It knows that all of these lives, it can't be avoided or altered, and it knows it has to go through them because it's been through it an infinite number of times before. It's been through this cycle infinitely. It never ends. And it's always going on this journey from absolute separation as some kind of animal being to absolute union over and over again, just in different cycles, different hierarchies of cycles. And it's always going through this process of separation to union over and over again, but in different ways, in new forms, in higher forms, always higher and higher. And of course, initially, we can know this through books, through reading and spiritual study. We've got this huge spiritual heritage that's been bequeathed to us, from the last century, a lot of modern spiritual ideas, and then in the previous 20, 30 centuries, lots of interesting, sometimes difficult to understand spiritual ideas and materials. We can encounter all of that, and we can use all of that for our growth. But the most important way that we can know that this is happening, not just intellectually, is through our higher self. Our higher self knows this, and it teaches us directly through experience, through intuition, through our growth. It furnishes the self with the proof, if you like, with the lessons, with the real experiential lessons of all the spiritual teachings. But again, only in its own time, according to nature's process and progress, has to do it by the book. Now, if anyone knows about this struggle, about the struggle of this process, it's the higher self, okay? It knows that the struggle is real because it experiences its lower self's loneliness. It experiences all its ignorance, its pain, its struggle. It knows that it has to be this way. It can't do anything about it, despite all its cryings out, all its exhortations, and all of its fumbling in the dark. Nature, the higher self even, can't take off that blindfold, because the blindfold being taken off is a natural process. It's an evolutionary process. So the higher self has to be patient, and eternally so. It's sitting there waiting like, oh my God, how long is this going to take? I can't do anything about it. I just have to follow this process. But I know it's going to happen. It has to take its course. But it knows something very key that you don't, and that is the state of wandering around blindly, feeling separated, longing for inner connection, longing for connection to everything. All the difficulties that this causes, all the suffering within and in the world, all of that is precisely the condition and state of affairs that is the natural course of things through which the connection can happen in the first place and through which it will happen. And this is what the higher self knows. It's already seen it. It knows that every fall, every cut and bruise along the way, every scrape, it's part of the journey of connection. And even if it could stop the falls from happening, which it can't, because otherwise chaos would ensue, the cycle would break, and everything would fall apart, and we just wouldn't have existence. Then the higher self, even if it could make the connection happen just like that, the higher self would be preventing its own evolution and connection with itself. And that's really, really important. Because it feels very unjust, that it knows what's going on, but it doesn't interfere. It lets happen what happens to us. Watches on, knowing what's going on, not being able to do anything about it, and witnesses everything. And it feels tough. Gosh, how many times have I cried out, like, how can you let this happen? How can this be? I'm like berated my higher self, myself, for letting chaos ensue, letting things happen in the way that they happen. It's only later, sadly, that I see that they couldn't have happened in any other way. And unfortunately, you don't get the benefits of the chaos, or you don't see them until much later. It's just how it is. It's a bit of a waiting game. As I say, difficult one. In my experience, my higher self, my experience of higher self has sometimes taken the form of an older brother, the patient parent, the understanding boss, a loving friend, kind of shaking their head as if to say, what are you doing? Come on, why are you bothering with this or that? We've done that already. Why are you going back there? We've gone down that road again. We've just come from there. I don't get it. And the higher self looks on, kind of dismayed at us, waiting up ahead whilst we faff around in the rubbish dump, regurgitating old food, picking up toys that we've discarded long ago and trying to make ourselves laugh and smile. Higher self is there looking at their watch thinking, well, I knew it would take time. It's always the same with this lower self of mine. But, oh, divine one, what can I do? It has to be. It has to be. I mean, as I said, it's because nature has its own processes, its own structure. Evolution has its own structure. But the lower self also, as an entity, has its own nature, structure, processes, its own way of being and functioning. And that also is a natural thing. And yeah, you can learn about the lower self through, again, all those spiritual ideas, through studying, through observing yourself. That's definitely been a part of my own path. And there's a lot of use in all of that. I would say it's kind of essential in some way or another, but not everyone's path follows, book learning. I mean, I would say it's essential, but I would absolutely also say that for someone else who's of totally different nature, it would be okay. Maybe it's not even important or essential for them, because other people come to their connection with their higher self through different ways, different avenues. So, there's many ways. It's up to your higher self. Your higher self knows what to do and how to connect. We just have to find the right way. So the key point here is that the higher self can only look on. It can't break nature, just as the lower self also can't break its nature. I think one of the downsides of the kind of modern spiritual movement of the last 60, 80 years is that it's kind of created a little bit of an illusion that you can break that connection, that you can kind of hack it. And nature kind of has built in it a certain flexibility that, you can break it up to a certain point, but only within certain limits. You can't actually break the cycle of evolution and nature as a whole. Nature gives you a little bit of leeway, and there's lessons to be learned in that. Okay, let's give you a little bit of rope here. Let's see how far you go with this. Yeah, you can try all these different methods. You can try and force evolution. You can try and force cosmic consciousness, but yeah, you'll see that it's going to snap back in some way at some point. It's going to come back to bite you, that. And you know what? It's not going to work. You can try to hack your own evolution, but yeah, there's lessons to be learned in that. And if you want to do those lessons, then there's room for that. Your higher self will know that, yeah, okay, we're going to go down that road for a little bit, are we? Fair enough, let's do that. But eventually you come back to the natural path of just surrendering to and accepting that you can't miss any stages. Just can't happen. Can't suddenly transform. That's the great illusion, I think, of modern spiritual teachings, that perhaps give the impression, even if they don't overtly say, that this is going to happen, this is just around the corner. Your higher self wants you. It's part of nature. But you can't force it to happen. Just as the tiger or the lion can't suddenly become a being of love and light. It just doesn't happen. If that happened, if that could happen, I mean, if the higher self of the lion really wanted to just say, you know what, I've had enough. I don't want to be in this jungle anymore. I know I'm an eternal being. I just want to become a full, enlightened, spiritual being of love and light with my eternal existence. If that could happen, and higher selves could do that, then we'd see that happening in nature. We'd be in the jungle with our little guns trying to hunt the lion for its skin, and suddenly we'd see it turn into a being of light. And this doesn't happen. Interestingly, may happen in myth. Why is that? There's an interesting story there, potentially, maybe for another episode. But no, the higher self of the tiger has to grow out of being a tiger first and become something like a modern Homo sapien. And the Homo sapien has to grow out of being a Homo sapien. It's just how it is. Now, it might sound like I'm being a bit of a party pooper here, that I'm, being a real downer. Like, oh, no, what can we do? You're saying nothing can be done? Well, no, not nothing. I mean, nature is happening. Nature isn't nothing. Evolution is happening. It's just takes its own time. You can't force it, that's all. You can't have that much of an impact through your own efforts. Your own efforts are a part of the story, but they're just a part. It's not the whole story. It's the great trick of ego, of the lower self's identity construction, that it can control nature. Because I think part of the higher self's kind of teaching and imparting of divine wisdom is to do with sovereignty, because the higher self, in its complete, connected, unified form, is a sovereign being, and the lower self, the ego, takes that on itself. Like, yes, I'm a sovereign being, I can do whatever I want, I'm master of the universe. No, the lower self is not master of the universe. The lower self is a physical world form of the higher self that actually, in its purest form, should be a passive container of the higher self. It's when the lower self kind of starts to learn this and learn the limitations of itself, rather than taking on new ideas of itself, lets go of ideas of what it is, that the higher self can actually start connecting in a real way. So the best thing that the lower self can do is actually to stop reading, to stop listening. Sorry, not stop listening. It's to stop acquiring, to stop taking on of some things, and let go of many others, to relax a little, to learn to listen. This is the real lesson of this episode, that the higher self wants to connect, is actually trying to tell you how to connect, but you've got to learn how to listen to it. It knows how to connect. It knows how to live its incarnation in a way that will lead to connection. It knows the path. You just have to learn how to listen to it. Reading books, doing courses, learning spiritual philosophies, and they all help, maybe, but they can also get in the way. Learning how to listen to your higher self is the best form of connecting to the higher self. So learning how to trust the higher self, learning how to trust nature and evolution, that's the real lesson. And that's what's really difficult, because we've become so artificial. Culture and civilization has become so artificial because it's driven by ego and by, that part of ourselves that wants to control everything. And so it's created whole systems and whole cultures that actually make listening to natural processes very difficult, because there's a lot of noise. So if you can cut through the noise and listen to what your higher self is telling you, the higher self is always trying to give the advice. It's there inside, like the most advanced part of you, standing across a bridge over a river, waving you over, trying to use sign language to guide you across, telling you where you need to put your foot. Okay, you need to put your foot there, and then move back a little bit there, and then, okay, come there. It's like trying to guide you, but you've got your blindfold on. And all you can hear is the sounds of the river under the bridge, and the traffic and the noise of life all around, the cars and everything, people coming and going. It's all just like, whoa, the higher self can't come across the bridge and carry you. There's a line between the higher and the lower, and it can't cross that to come and get you. You need to connect first, and then you can go backwards and forwards, but across the line. But if it did that, if it forced the lower self to connect, nature would break. It has its own domain of being. It can't be anything other than itself. If it came across, it would be like a lower self. Again, there's an interesting thought line that goes with that, because of course other people are also higher selves in the form of lower self. But that's getting way off topic. It's for the lower self living on the other side of the bridge to come across and to have that blindfold taken off by nature. So people, as much as your higher self wants to connect, it has to be patient. Has to look on as you hold your hands out trying to grab and reach for it, missing every time. But it experiences the sadness, it experiences the pain of that experience of not connecting, not only in this life, but from all your lives. Every death, every battle with illness, every cry for help, it's felt, and it has suffered more than you if you only knew. And in fact, in some distant future, at some point you will know through your higher self. You'll know through your bodies, viscerally, experientially, where you've been, all those steps that you've taken, how painful they were. You'll remember them, and you'll realize that it's only because of that particular sequence of errors and events that you're able to connect in the first place. Thank you for listening. This has been The Higher Self, dialogues written by me, your host, Anton Jared. Thank you, and I will see you hopefully in the next episode where I'll continue to talk about this struggle. The struggle of connection and why it is such a struggle. It's a very important topic, because if you can really get to grips with it, you can really see that it doesn't have to be the struggle that it is, and that it so often appears to be.